There's a moment, just a split second, when everything changes, and you never see it coming. I've lived through hundreds of moments like that, where one wrong move, one careless word, and you're left standing in the wreckage, wondering where everything went wrong. I wasn't prepared for what happened that night. No one ever is. I had just finished a long day at work. The usual grind. Meetings, emails, endless phone calls. It was the kind of day that leaves you drained, when all you want is a quiet evening. But the silence, the quiet, that's when it starts to feel suffocating. I poured myself a glass of whiskey, letting the amber liquid slide into the glass. I stared at the bottle for a moment, watching the light reflect off it, as if waiting for some answer. I needed something to distract me from the thoughts that kept swirling in my head. The sound of the glass against the counter was the only thing that broke the silence of the house. And then, just like that, the door opened. I didn't even look up at first. I figured it was her, coming home from work, or maybe from one of those late-night meetings she always had. Evelyn had her own life. She always had. And I had mine. But when I heard the click of her heels on the floor, something felt off. Her footsteps didn't sound like they usually did. They were slower, hesitant, almost like she wasn't sure about coming back. I didn't know what I was expecting when I finally looked up, but I certainly didn't expect her to stand there, looking at me like I was a stranger. Her eyes were distant, cold, and when she opened her mouth to speak, I braced myself for what I knew was coming. "Can we talk?" she asked, her voice steady but flat. I took a sip from my glass, trying to steady the knot that had suddenly formed in my stomach. There it was, the line that always comes before the storm. "Sure," I said, my voice thick, unsure of what was about to unfold. She sat across from me, her gaze fixed on her hands in her lap. I could feel the distance between us growing, stretching like a rubber band about to snap. I waited for her to speak, to tell me what was on her mind, but she just sat there, as if she were lost in her own thoughts. "I've been thinking," she finally said, her voice barely above a whisper. "I think I need something different. Something more." The words hit me like a punch to the gut. She didn't need to say anything more. I knew exactly what she meant. She was done with me. She didn't need me anymore. I sat back in my chair, trying to catch my breath, but it felt like the air was being sucked out of the room. I stared at her, waiting for some sign, some indication that this was just a bad dream, that she would laugh and tell me she was joking. But she didn't. She just looked at me, her eyes empty. "Is there someone else?" I asked, the words slipping out before I could stop them. I immediately regretted it, but there was no going back now. She didn't answer right away. She didn't have to. The way she looked away, the way she clenched her jaw, told me everything I needed to know. There was someone else. I wasn't the one anymore. "I don't want to hurt you," she said, her voice trembling, though I wasn't sure if it was from guilt or from something else. "But I'm not happy here. I haven't been for a while." The room felt colder, and I felt myself shutting down. The whiskey, now warm in my hand, suddenly didn't taste as good. I could feel the weight of the moment pressing down on me, but I didn't know how to react. Should I beg her to stay? Should I apologize for whatever I'd done to push her away? Or should I just accept that this was it? She didn't wait for me to respond. She stood up and grabbed her coat from the back of the chair. Her movements were slow, deliberate, as if she were trying to make this moment last. But I knew better. She was already gone. She walked toward the door, and just before she left, she turned back to look at me one last time. "I'm sorry, Adam," she said, her voice barely audible. "I think this is the end." And with that, she was gone. I stood there, frozen. The house that had once felt like home now felt like a cage. The silence that followed her departure was suffocating, and I suddenly realized how alone I was. How alone I had been for a long time, even when she was here. I didn't know what to do. I didn't know how to fix this. But what I did know was that I wasn't going to sit around and wait for her to come back. Not this time. It had been a few weeks since Evelyn left. And even though I kept telling myself I'd moved on, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. It wasn't just the empty space where she used to sit at dinner or the absence of her laughter that lingered in the house. It was the silence, the kind of silence that settles in after everything's been said, after all the words have been exhausted. I kept myself busy. I threw myself into work, pouring myself into projects I'd been putting off for months. I started doing things I had neglected, like cleaning out the garage and fixing the broken faucet in the bathroom. Anything to keep my mind occupied. Anything to avoid facing the truth. Evelyn was never coming back. But that didn't stop me from thinking about her. I'd see her face in my mind at the most unexpected times, in the middle of a meeting, during breakfast, or when I was driving home. And every time I thought of her, a wave of anger would rush through me, followed by a crushing sense of betrayal. How could she just walk away? How could she say she wasn't happy and then walk out the door like I didn't matter? One evening, after a long day at the office, I sat in my car outside of the house, staring at the front door. I couldn't bring myself to go inside. I knew it wasn't home anymore. It was just a house, four walls that used to contain everything I thought I knew about love. I don't know how long I sat there, but eventually, I forced myself out of the car and into the house. As I entered, I noticed a strange, empty kind of peace. The silence was deafening. There were no voices, no footsteps, no sounds of life. I went straight to the kitchen, grabbing a bottle of whiskey from the cabinet. I poured myself a drink, the amber liquid swirling in my glass as I tried to steady my nerves. I wasn't used to being alone, not like this. I leaned against the counter and stared at the glass, wondering if I would ever feel whole again. Would I ever feel like I belonged anywhere? Or was this it? Just a series of endless days and nights, replaying the same events, trying to figure out where it all went wrong. It wasn't long before I heard the knock on the door. At first, I didn't even move. It couldn't be her. I had told myself she wasn't coming back. But then, the knock came again, more insistent this time. I stood frozen, a cold chill running down my spine. My heart started racing. Who would be here at this hour? Reluctantly, I walked toward the door. I didn't want to open it, but I couldn't ignore it. The curiosity gnawed at me, pulling me closer to the door with each step. When I opened it, my breath caught in my throat. There she was, Evelyn, standing in the doorway, her face pale, eyes wide with something I couldn't quite read. For a moment, neither of us spoke. She just stood there, looking at me like she was trying to figure out if I was the person she thought I was. And I, too, was searching her face for some sign, some explanation for why she was standing on my doorstep after everything that had happened. Evelyn, I asked, my voice tight, unsure of what to feel. She hesitated, and then took a step forward. She started, but her words faltered. She glanced down, wringing her hands together like she was nervous. I made a mistake, she finally whispered. I blinked, unable to process what she was saying. What do you mean? I shouldn't have left, she said, her voice barely audible. I've been thinking about it a lot, and I want to come back. For a moment, I couldn't breathe. A million thoughts rushed through my mind, and yet I couldn't find the words. Part of me wanted to scream at her, to ask how she could just waltz back into my life after everything. The other part of me, the part that had never stopped loving her, wanted to pull her inside, to forget everything and just hold her again. But I didn't do either of those things. I just stood there, looking at her, trying to decide whether I should trust her, or if it was too late for that. Eve, I finally said, my voice cracking. You can't just come back like nothing happened. You can't erase what you did. I don't know if I can just forget it. Her eyes filled with tears, and she took another step toward me, her hand reaching out like she was begging for forgiveness. Please, Adam. I'm sorry. I was confused. I was stupid. But I'm here now. I want to fix this. I want to be with you again. I could feel the weight of her words, but at the same time, something inside me was screaming not to believe her. What if she was just here because she needed someone to fall back on? What if this was all just another attempt to make herself feel better without considering how it would affect me? But then, as I stood there, watching her, I realized I was still in love with her. Despite everything, despite the betrayal, I wanted to believe her. I wanted to think that we could pick up the pieces of our broken marriage and somehow make it work. But something inside me told me that this wasn't going to be easy. Nothing about this situation felt right. And deep down, I knew we were both standing on the edge of something much darker than either of us were ready for. The night Evelyn showed up at my door, I didn't know what to feel. On the one hand, I was elated, relieved that the woman I had loved for so many years was standing in front of me, asking for another chance. But on the other hand, I couldn't shake the gnawing suspicion that something wasn't quite right. Her apology sounded sincere, but how could I trust it? After everything she had said, after everything she had done, how could I just let her back into my life? I let her in, but there was a heaviness between us. It wasn't the same as before. We didn't pick up where we left off. There was a fragile tension that lingered in the air, as if we were both walking on eggshells, afraid to say the wrong thing. She sat on the couch, wringing her hands nervously, looking around as though the house, the life we once built together, had somehow become foreign to her. I took a seat across from her, unsure of how to proceed. Part of me wanted to yell, to demand answers, but another part of me wanted to hear her out. She had come back, and I had to give her that much. But I also needed to understand why. Why had she left in the first place? What had driven her to do something so drastic? I don't know where to start, she said, breaking the silence. Her voice trembled as she spoke, and I could hear the desperation in her tone. Adam, I'm sorry. I was selfish, and Evelyn, I interrupted, my voice quiet but firm. You can't just show up here and expect me to forget everything. You left me without a word, without any explanation. I thought I was going crazy trying to figure out what went wrong. And now you're back, saying you were confused? That's not enough. I need the truth. The whole truth. She flinched at my words, but there was no turning back now. I needed to hear it. I needed to understand why she had walked away from everything we had. She took a deep breath, wiping her eyes as she steadied herself. For a moment, I thought she might break down again, but instead, she composed herself and began speaking. I wasn't happy, Adam. I hadn't been for a long time, and I didn't know how to fix it. I wasn't the person I used to be, and I thought maybe I could find myself again, somewhere else. I listened in silence, but her words hit me harder than I expected. She had been unhappy, and I never saw it. I thought we were doing fine. Sure, we had our issues, but I never imagined it was this bad. Never imagined she could feel so lost inside our marriage that she'd just walk away. But why not talk to me? I asked, my voice cracking. Why didn't you come to me with your problems? I would have listened. I would have tried to fix things. I would have done anything. Her gaze dropped to her lap, and she sighed. I didn't think you could fix it, Adam. I didn't think we could fix it. She looked up at me then, and there was a vulnerability in her eyes that I hadn't seen before. I thought maybe if I walked away, I could figure things out on my own. But I didn't realize how much I was hurting you in the process. It felt like a punch to the stomach. The realization that she had walked away not because she wanted to be free, but because she thought I couldn't make her happy anymore, hit me harder than I expected. She had lost faith in us. She had given up on me. Did you ever love me? I asked, the question slipping out before I could stop myself. The weight of it hung in the air like a thick fog. She hesitated before answering. I did. I do, she said softly. But I wasn't in love with you anymore. I wasn't the person I used to be, and I didn't know how to be with you when I didn't know who I was anymore. The words stung, but I couldn't look away. Part of me wanted to scream, to tell her how much it hurt, how much I had suffered when she walked out of my life. But another part of me, the part that still cared about her, the part that wanted to believe in us, understood. She had been lost. But so had I. We had both been drifting in different directions, neither of us knowing how to get back on course. So what now? I asked, my voice low. You come back, and we just pick up where we left off? You think we can just forget everything and start fresh? She looked at me, her eyes filled with uncertainty. I don't know, Adam. I wish I had the answers. But I want to try. I want to see if we can make this work. I didn't know what to say. I didn't know if I could trust her again. But I also knew that I couldn't just let go without trying. I wanted to believe in us. I wanted to believe that we could fix this, that we could find our way back to each other. But the truth was, I was scared. Scared of being hurt again. Scared of giving her my heart and having her walk away again. And that's when I realized that I had two choices. I could either hold on to the hope that things could be different, or I could walk away and never look back. But the truth was, I wasn't ready to let go of her. Not yet. The days that followed Evelyn's return were an odd mix of hope and dread. I kept telling myself that maybe, just maybe, we could fix things. After all, she came back. She wanted to try, didn't she? But as each day passed, I started to realize that it wasn't as simple as just picking up the pieces and pretending everything was fine. We didn't talk much about what happened while she was gone. She said she needed space to find herself, and I didn't know what to say to that. How do you respond when someone tells you they weren't sure if they ever loved you the way they used to? How do you face that? I kept hoping she would open up more, but every time I asked about her time away, her face would go blank, and she'd change the subject. It wasn't long before the cracks in our so-called fresh start began to show. She would disappear for hours, usually saying she was meeting a friend or catching up on errands. I didn't know why. but it bothered me more than I cared to admit. I didn't want to be that guy, the jealous, overthinking husband who couldn't trust his wife. But that's exactly who I was becoming. One afternoon, after she had left for one of her errands, I found myself pacing in the living room. I had just finished working from home and had nothing to occupy my mind. I picked up my phone, scrolling through the usual distractions, but none of it helped. My mind kept wandering back to her. Where was she? Who was she with? Why did it feel like she was slipping away again, even though she was physically here? I grabbed my jacket, and before I could stop myself, I was heading out the door. I had to do something. I had to know. I drove around aimlessly, trying to shake the feeling of paranoia that had begun to creep into my thoughts. And then I saw her. She was walking out of a small cafe near the park, laughing, talking to a man I didn't recognize. The sight of them together hit me like a freight train, but I didn't stop to process the emotions that were flooding through me. I pulled into a side street, parked, and watched. I told myself it was just a friend. But deep down, I knew I was lying to myself. I saw them exchange a long hug before he kissed her on the cheek. My heart skipped a beat, and all the air left my lungs. The way she looked at him, it wasn't the same way she looked at me. There was something between them that wasn't just friendship. It wasn't the first time I had caught her with someone else, but this felt different. This time, she wasn't trying to hide it. She was just herself. She didn't look guilty. She didn't look ashamed. I sat there for what felt like an eternity, trying to make sense of everything. My phone buzzed, and I snapped out of my trance. It was a text from Evelyn. "Hey, I'll be home soon. Sorry I'm late." I didn't know what to say. Part of me wanted to confront her right then and there, demand answers, ask her who he was, what was really going on. But another part of me, I wasn't ready for that. Not yet. I didn't want to hear the truth, not like this. Not without preparing myself for it. I drove back home, my thoughts swirling. The house felt colder when I walked inside, like something had shifted that I couldn't undo. I sat down on the couch, my mind a mess, waiting for her to return. When she finally walked in, she didn't say anything at first. She seemed almost off, like she was hiding something. I could tell she was avoiding my gaze. The tension was unbearable. "Where were you?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. She paused, and then, almost as if she were rehearsing her words, she said, "I was with Claudia. We were talking about everything." I didn't say anything. I just nodded, though my mind screamed at me. I wanted to believe her. I really did. But everything inside me was telling me that something wasn't right. "Who was that guy?" I asked, my voice barely steady. "The one you were with earlier?" She froze. For a moment, I thought I had caught her off guard, but she quickly masked it with a smile. "What guy?" she said, though I could see the way her eyes shifted. "The one you were hugging in the cafe," I pressed, unable to hold back. "Who is he, Evelyn?" Her face went pale. She opened her mouth to speak, but then closed it again, as if weighing her words carefully. Finally, she sighed and sat down beside me. "His name is Mark. He's a friend from work." I didn't respond right away. I wasn't sure what I was expecting, but I knew it wasn't that. "A friend from work didn't kiss you on the cheek, didn't hold you like that." "You're lying," I said, the words coming out harsher than I meant them to. "You're lying, Evelyn. That's not just a friend." Her eyes filled with tears, and she quickly wiped them away. "Adam, please," she whispered. "I didn't want you to find out this way." But I cut her off. "But you've already made your choice, haven't you? You've already chosen him." The silence between us stretched on, thick and suffocating. I realized then that I didn't need her to say anything more. The truth was already in front of me. She had chosen someone else, and I had just been too blind to see it. "I think it's time for you to leave," I said quietly. The words felt like acid on my tongue, but they were the only words that made sense. The days that followed were surreal. It was as if time had frozen in place, leaving me to deal with the aftermath of a bombshell I wasn't prepared for. Evelyn had left, but the empty space she left behind felt suffocating. I couldn't get away from the house. The silence clung to every room, every corner. I tried to ignore the weight of the situation, but no matter where I went, my thoughts kept dragging me back to that moment in the cafe. Her touch, the way she smiled at him, it haunted me. I was in shock. That much was clear. I kept telling myself I needed to get over it. I needed to heal. But how could I heal when everything around me was a constant reminder of the betrayal? The photos of us on the walls, the empty chair where she used to sit, the ring still on my finger, It all felt like I was living in a nightmare I couldn't wake up from. I'd go through the motions of daily life. Work, errands, cooking dinner, but it all felt hollow. I wasn't doing it for myself anymore. I was just going through the motions, trying to fill the hours until I could fall asleep and escape the pain, if only for a little while. And then, one evening, the phone rang. I didn't recognize the number, but something told me I needed to pick it up. I did, almost mechanically. Adam. It was Evelyn's voice, shaky and uncertain, but unmistakable. Eve. I asked, my voice tight. What do you want? She hesitated, and I could hear the guilt in her voice. I didn't want to hurt you. I know I've made a mess of everything, but I need to talk. I need to explain. I could feel the tension in my chest, and I found myself holding my breath. She hadn't tried to call me in days. What was she thinking now? Did she want to make things right? Or was this another attempt to make herself feel better without considering how much she had destroyed? What's there to explain, Evelyn? I asked, my voice sharper than I intended. You've already made your choice. You chose him. I know, she whispered, her voice cracking. But it wasn't like that, Adam. It's not what you think. I clenched my jaw, trying to fight back the rage that was building inside me. Then what was it like, Eve? You tell me. You tell me what you were doing with him. How you could just walk out and leave everything behind. Was I just nothing to you? She was silent for a moment, and I could feel the tears welling up in my eyes. The frustration, the hurt, it all came rushing to the surface. But I didn't want to cry. Not now. Not after everything. I made a mistake, she said, her voice barely a whisper. I thought I needed him. I thought I could be happy with someone else. But Adam, I was wrong. It felt like I had been hit by a freight train. She was still choosing him. She was still trying to make me believe that it was just a mistake. But I wasn't stupid. I wasn't going to fall for it. I don't want to hear your excuses, Evelyn, I said, cutting her off. I don't care if it was a mistake. I don't care if you were confused. You made a choice, and now you have to live with it. I know, she said, and there was a weight in her voice that made my heart ache. I know I hurt you, and I don't expect you to forgive me. I need to see you one last time. Please, Adam. Please let me explain in person. For a moment, I hesitated. Every part of me wanted to say no. Every part of me wanted to close that door forever and move on. But then another part of me, the part that still loved her, wanted to know the truth. I wanted to hear it from her, straight from her mouth. Maybe, deep down, I was still hoping for something. Anything that would make sense of the mess she had left behind. Fine, I said finally. But this is the last time, Evelyn. After this, we're done. I hung up the phone, my hands trembling. The decision had been made. I wasn't going to let her back in, not for good. But I needed to know what had happened, what had led her to this point. That night, I stayed up late, pacing the floor, waiting for her. I wasn't sure what to expect, but I was certain it wouldn't bring the closure I needed. How could it? How could I ever find closure when everything between us was shattered? The idea of seeing her again made my stomach turn, but it also sparked a tiny ember of hope. Hope that maybe, just maybe, she would explain everything in a way that made sense. She arrived late, knocking softly at the door. I opened it without a word, and there she was, standing in front of me with her arms crossed, her face pale. She looked like she hadn't slept in days. The bags under her eyes were deeper than I remembered, and her hair was messier than usual, as if she hadn't cared to fix it. I'm sorry, she said quietly, stepping inside without waiting for an invitation. I didn't want things to end this way. I didn't want to hurt you. I didn't say anything. I just nodded, stepping aside to let her in. The tension was palpable, like we were both holding our breath, waiting for something to happen. But we weren't ready for what came next. She sat down across from me on the couch, avoiding my eyes. And for a moment, the silence felt unbearable. I waited, but she didn't speak. Her hands were trembling, and I noticed the way she kept looking at her lap, as if she couldn't bear to meet my gaze. Evelyn, I said, breaking the silence. Why? Why him? Why now? She looked up at me then, her eyes full of something I couldn't quite name. It wasn't about him, Adam. It was never about him. I thought I was going crazy trying to live up to this idea of what I was supposed to be. I thought leaving would fix it, but it didn't. It didn't fix anything. It just made everything worse. Her voice cracked as she spoke, and I could hear the emotion in it. She was trying to explain, but it wasn't enough. I wasn't sure if I wanted it to be enough. As the night stretched on, The silence between us became unbearable. We were sitting there, two strangers pretending to understand each other. Evelyn had apologized, but I didn't know if I could ever forgive her. Her words didn't hold the weight they once did. They felt empty, like she was saying what she thought I wanted to hear. I couldn't trust her anymore. And deep down, I knew I shouldn't have let her back in. She sat on the couch, nervously twirling a strand of hair around her finger, avoiding my gaze. It was clear she was struggling with the words, trying to say what was in her heart, but not fully ready to admit the truth. And I was tired. Tired of waiting for answers. Tired of being in this emotional limbo where nothing made sense. So I decided to push. "Stop hiding," I said, my voice firmer than I expected. "If you want to talk, then talk. Don't feed me some rehearsed script you think I'll buy. I need to know who you really are, Evelyn. Who you've really been." She flinched at the sharpness in my tone, but I didn't back down. I couldn't. I had been the one holding everything together, and it was exhausting. I need to hear the truth. All of it. For a long moment, she didn't speak. Her eyes were glassy, like she was fighting against something. Fighting against the guilt, the fear, the shame of everything she'd done. Finally, she sighed, her voice breaking through the tension. "I don't know what happened," she began, her words slower this time, more deliberate. "I thought I wanted to be with you, Adam. I really did. But over time, I didn't feel like myself anymore. I felt like I was losing who I was. I was always trying to be what you needed, what we needed, and I thought that was enough. But it wasn't." I could hear the pain in her voice, but it didn't change the fact that she had betrayed me. "But leaving, Evelyn?" I asked, shaking my head. "You didn't think we could fix this together? You didn't think we could talk about it?" She looked away, her voice barely above a whisper. "I didn't think you'd understand. I didn't think I could make you understand how lost I felt. And that's when I met him. Mark." She paused, biting her lip like she was trying to hold back tears. It wasn't supposed to happen the way it did. I didn't expect it, but I couldn't stop it. A heavy silence hung between us, and I felt my heart sink. "So you left me for him?" I asked, the words tasting bitter as they left my mouth. "No," she said quickly, shaking her head. "No, I didn't leave you for him. I was already gone. I thought I could find something with him, but I was just running away from the truth." My chest tightened as her words hit me. She had already made up her mind. She had already checked out, even before she walked out the door. She was right, in a way. She had been gone long before she physically left, and I had just been too blind to see it. "I'm sorry," she repeated, looking up at me with tears in her eyes. "I didn't mean to hurt you. I didn't mean for any of this to happen." But the thing was, I didn't want her apologies anymore. They felt hollow, meaningless. She could apologize 1,000 times, but it didn't change the fact that she had broken everything we had. I was angry, but I was more than that. I was disappointed. Deep down, I knew she wasn't the woman I had fallen in love with. The person sitting in front of me now was a stranger. "I can't do this anymore, Evelyn," I said, my voice quieter now, but the finality in it was unmistakable. I've tried. I've tried so hard to make sense of everything. But I can't keep pretending like I'm fine. I can't keep pretending like you haven't already made your choice." She opened her mouth to speak, but I held up my hand, stopping her. "No, I don't need your explanation anymore. I don't need your promises that you'll change. It's too late for that." The reality of what I was saying hit me like a ton of bricks. I had spent so long trying to fix something that wasn't fixable, and it had taken me this long to admit it. But in that moment, I finally understood. I had to let her go. I couldn't keep holding on to a version of her that didn't exist anymore. She stood up, wiping her eyes with the back of her hand. I could see the shock in her face, the realization that I wasn't going to beg her to stay. This wasn't some emotional plea for reconciliation. This was the end. "Are you sure about this?" she asked, her voice shaky, as though she didn't fully believe what was happening. I didn't answer right away. I took a deep breath and stood up, walking over to the window and looking out at the night. "I don't know," I finally said, my voice thick. "But I know I can't keep doing this. I can't keep living in the past, hoping you'll come back to me. I deserve more than that." I could feel her watching me, and for a moment, I thought she might say something else. But she didn't. Instead, she walked towards the door, slowly, almost like she was unsure of where she was going. "I'll give you the space you need," she said quietly, her back turned to me. "I'm sorry, Adam. I really am." And with that, she left. The door clicked shut behind her, and I was alone again. I didn't feel relief, though. I felt empty, like something had been torn away from me that I couldn't get back. The house felt colder, quieter, but there was something else there, too, a sense of clarity. I had let her go, and now, for the first time in a long time, I was free. The days that followed were a blur. I went through the motions of everyday life, but nothing felt real anymore. The house, once filled with laughter and conversation, now felt like a ghost town. I slept poorly, my dreams haunted by Evelyn's face, her apology, and the image of her walking out the door for the last time. I threw myself into work to avoid facing what had happened. Every meeting, every phone call, felt like a distraction from the constant ache in my chest. But even in the middle of my busiest days, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was still unresolved. I kept telling myself I was fine. I was moving on. But deep down, I knew I wasn't. It was late one evening when I finally let my guard down. I had been out for a walk, trying to clear my mind, when I returned to find a message waiting on my phone. At first, I thought it was just spam, some work-related reminder, or one of those generic texts from friends trying to check in. But when I saw the name at the top of the message, my heart skipped a beat. It was from Evelyn. I didn't know what to expect when I opened it, but I was sure it wasn't going to be something I wanted to hear. The text read, "I know you said goodbye, but I can't leave things like this. Please, can we talk one last time? I need to explain everything. Can we meet?" I stared at the phone, the words blurring as my mind raced. I had already told her goodbye. I had already closed that chapter. But she was back again, knocking at the door of my heart, asking for something I wasn't sure I could give her anymore. I wasn't sure what to feel. Part of me wanted to tell her to leave me alone, to finally move on without her shadow hanging over me. But another part of me, a part one wasn't proud of, was still hoping for something, anything, that could bring back the life I had lost. I sat on the edge of the couch, the weight of the decision hanging in the air. Finally, I tapped out a response. "Fine. But this is the last time." I didn't know what I was getting myself into. I didn't know if I was ready to hear what she had to say, or if I could even trust her after everything. But I knew I couldn't just ignore her message. Not when I was still trying to make sense of everything. We agreed to meet at the cafe where we used to go. The one place that still felt like ours. I don't know why we picked that place. Maybe it was because it held memories of happier times, when we didn't have to second-guess each other's intentions. When things were simple. When I arrived, she was already there, sitting at a corner table, her back to the window. She looked up as soon as I entered, her eyes locking onto mine. For a moment, we just stood there, silently taking each other in. It was as if we were both waiting for the other to make the first move, to break the silence that had settled between us. She stood up when I walked over, and I could see the hesitation in her movements. She was nervous, genuinely nervous. Her usual confidence was gone. "Adam," she said softly, her voice carrying the weight of everything unsaid. "I'm sorry for what happened. I've been thinking about it a lot. About what we had. About what I lost." I didn't say anything right away. I just sat down across from her, my gaze steady, but my mind swirling with 1,000 different thoughts. I could feel the walls closing in, and I didn't know if I could handle whatever she was about to say. She took a deep breath, and for a moment, I thought she might cry. But she didn't. Instead, she looked at me with an intensity that made me uneasy. "I've made a lot of mistakes," she said, her voice trembling just slightly. "I thought I knew what I wanted, but I was wrong. I hurt you, and I hurt myself, and I can't take any of it back. But I need you to know that what I did wasn't about you. It was about me. I was lost, and I thought I could find myself by running away. But now I realize that all I've done is lose everything." The words hung in the air, and I couldn't quite process them. It felt like she was speaking a foreign language, one I used to understand but had forgotten over time. I stared at her, trying to make sense of what she was saying. "You're not the same person anymore, Evelyn," I said, my voice hoarse. "I'm not the same person either. I've changed too. And the truth is, I don't know if we can ever go back to what we were." Her eyes filled with tears, and I felt a pang of guilt in my chest. But I couldn't stop. I had to say it. I had to make her understand that we couldn't just pick up the pieces and pretend like everything was fine. "I know," she whispered. "I don't want to go back to what we were. I don't want to pretend that everything's fine. But I do want to try, Adam. I want to try to build something new. Something better. I don't want to lose you for good." Her words hit me harder than I expected. For a brief moment, I considered it. I thought about all the good times we'd shared, the love we once had. But then the reality of everything we'd been through flooded back. Her leaving, her betrayal, the emptiness that had followed. It wasn't just about love anymore. It was about trust, and I didn't know if I could ever trust her again. I don't know if I can do that, I said, my voice barely above a whisper. I don't know if I can trust you again. The silence that followed was deafening. Evelyn's face crumpled as she tried to hold back her tears. I don't expect you to forgive me. I don't even deserve your forgiveness. But I'm asking for a chance to make it right. I sat there, torn between what I wanted and what I knew was right. The truth was, I wasn't sure if there was a way back from this. I wasn't sure if I could ever let go of the pain she had caused. But part of me, the part that had loved her for so long, still wanted to believe in her. Still wanted to believe in us. The days that followed our conversation were filled with uncertainty. Evelyn and I spoke, but the words we exchanged felt like both a lifeline and a weight. We were walking on fragile ground, unable to undo the damage we had caused, yet still clinging to some hope that maybe, just maybe, we could build something new from the wreckage of the past. I won't lie, it wasn't easy. Every day, I struggled with the decision to let her back in. Every time she looked at me with those pleading eyes, asking for forgiveness, I was torn between wanting to believe her and wanting to protect myself from further hurt. There were moments when I felt like everything was too much, like the wounds were too deep to heal. But then, there were moments, small, fleeting moments, when I remembered why I had fallen in love with her in the first place. One evening, after weeks of difficult conversations and painful realizations, Evelyn asked me to meet her at the park, the one place where we had first met, years ago. It was a place that had once been filled with so much promise and joy. I wasn't sure what to expect, but I agreed. When I arrived, she was sitting on the same bench where we had shared our first kiss. Her back was to me, but as soon as she heard my footsteps, she turned around. The sight of her, sitting there waiting for me, felt surreal. There was something different about her now, more vulnerable, more honest. She stood up as I approached, her hands nervously clasped together. I could see the uncertainty in her eyes, the same uncertainty that had haunted me for weeks. She didn't speak at first. Instead, she just looked at me, as if she were waiting for something, waiting for me to say something. I've thought about this a lot, she finally said, her voice shaky. I don't know if we can ever go back to the way we were. And I don't want to. But I want to move forward, Adam. I want to build a new chapter. With you. If you'll let me. The honesty in her words hit me hard. It wasn't a perfect solution. There were still scars, still things we would both need to work through. But there was also a chance for something real. A chance to grow, to heal, together. I looked at her, my heart heavy with everything we'd been through, but also with something new, a sense of clarity. The past was painful, yes, but the future was still unwritten, and we had the power to shape it. I don't know if I can forget everything, Evelyn, I said, my voice softer now, but I think I can forgive. I think I can try. Her eyes filled with tears, but this time, they were different. These weren't tears of regret or guilt. These were tears of relief, of hope. She stepped closer, and without saying another word, she wrapped her arms around me. I hesitated for a moment, but then I let myself feel it, the comfort of holding her again, the warmth of her embrace. It wasn't perfect, but it felt real. And maybe that was enough. I've missed you, she whispered into my ear, and I could feel the sincerity in her voice. I've missed us. I pulled back slightly, looking into her eyes, and for the first time in a long time, I didn't feel angry or hurt. I just felt hopeful. I've missed us too, I said, my voice thick with emotion. And in that moment, I realized that love, real love, wasn't about being perfect. It wasn't about never making mistakes. It was about learning, growing, and finding your way back to each other, no matter how many times you got lost. We walked home together, side by side, not sure of what the future held, but ready to face it together. And that, in itself, felt like a victory. Not an end, but a beginning, a new chapter for both of us, written with honesty, forgiveness, and the kind of love that only comes after you've been through the fire and come out stronger.